Welcome to US Briefing. The content of the briefing includes tiny apartments, Melbourne housing crisis solution or glorified slums? An attack from Gaza and an Israeli declaration of war. Now what? Joe Biden decries the unconscionable Hamas attack and warns Israel's enemies not to exploit the crisis. Airlines cancel flights to Israel amid attacks. California Governor Gavin Newsom vetoes bill that would have decriminalized psychedelic mushrooms. Tiny apartments, Melbourne housing crisis solution or glorified slums? The Sydney Morning Herald. A proposed residential development in Brunswick, Melbourne, is aiming to provide affordable housing by offering smaller-scale living. The Sicer building on Albert Street would feature apartments that are less than 25 square meters in size and would not include car parking. While some support the development as a way of alleviating the housing crisis, others are concerned that it sets a dangerous precedent for future housing standards. The Sicer building is being promoted as a modest co-housing prototype, with communal spaces including a laundry, garden, kitchen and dining area. An attack from Gaza and an Israeli declaration of war. Now what? The Sydney Morning Herald. The conflict between Israel and Palestine has escalated to a full-scale war after nearly 50 years of relative peace and stability. Unlike previous clashes in Gaza, this conflict is being led by Hamas and its allies, with rocket attacks and incursions into Israel. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared war and is under pressure to mount a major military response. The psychological impact on Israelis has been compared to the shock of 9/11 in America. An Israeli invasion of Gaza is now a possibility, although it could have unforeseen consequences, such as disruption to diplomatic efforts between the US and Israel. There would also be pressure on Hezbollah, the Iran-backed militant group in southern Lebanon, to open up a second front in northern Israel. The conflict could unite Israel behind its government, giving Netanyahu full political cover to do what he wants, but it may not provide any long-term solutions. Israel withdrew its soldiers and citizens from Gaza in 2005, but retains control over its borders, leading to criticism that it has legal obligations for Gaza under international humanitarian law. Joe Biden decries the unconscionable Hamas attack and warns Israel's enemies not to exploit the crisis. The Toronto Star. President Joe Biden has condemned the unconscionable attack by Hamas militants and pledged his support to Israel in defending itself. Biden stated that the United States stands with Israel and that there is no justification for terrorist attacks. He warned Israel's enemies against exploiting the situation for their own advantage and stated that the world is watching. Biden said that he would stay in close contact with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other key figures, including Jordan's King Abdullah II and members of Congress. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin also spoke to their Israeli counterparts to discuss the situation. Biden emphasized that the U.S. is committed to helping Israel protect civilians and meet its defense needs. The hostilities have dealt a significant blow to U.S. efforts to expand normalization agreements in the Arab-Israeli region. Efforts to de-escalate the situation and find a short-term solution are unlikely to be successful while the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians is ongoing. Many world leaders have expressed solidarity with Israel and stressed its right to defend itself. Airlines cancel flights to Israel amid attacks. CNN. Airlines have been scrambling to cancel flights into Israel after Palestinian militants launched a surprise attack by firing thousands of rockets from Gaza into Israeli towns during a Jewish holiday. As of Saturday afternoon, about 16% of flights were cancelled and 23% were delayed to Ben Gurion International Airport, Israel's international hub, located just outside Tel Aviv. Some Israel-bound flights were diverted to other airports around the globe. United Airlines Flight 954 left San Francisco International Airport on Friday night and diverted over Greenland about 7 hours into the more than 13-hour-long journey, according to flight tracking site FlightAware. The flight would later return to San Francisco. Delta Airlines and American Airlines have also canceled Saturday and Sunday Israel-bound flights scheduled to depart from JFK International Airport in New York City. German airline Lufthansa also announced on Saturday it would drastically reduce flights to Tel Aviv. California Governor Gavin Newsom vetoes bill that would have decriminalized psychedelic mushrooms. The Toronto Star. California Governor Gavin Newsom has vetoed a bill aimed at decriminalizing the possession and personal use of several hallucinogens, including psychedelic mushrooms, dimethyltryptamine, DMT, and mescaline. The legislation would not have legalized the sale of the substances but would have ensured people are not arrested or prosecuted for possessing limited amounts of plant-based hallucinogens. Newsom said there needs to be more work done before California decriminalizes the substances, including setting up regulated treatment guidelines. The bill would have required the California Health and Human Services Agency to study and make recommendations on the therapeutic use of psychedelic substances. Israel vows mighty vengeance as Hamas warns deadly Gaza assault will spread. South China Morning Post. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to take mighty vengeance after gunmen from the Palestinian group Hamas carried out a deadly attack in Israeli towns, killing over 200 people and taking hostages. Israel responded with retaliatory strikes, killing over 230 Gazans. The Hamas leader said the assault would spread to the West Bank and Jerusalem. Western countries, led by the U.S., denounced the Palestinian attack and pledged support for Israel. Demonstrations in support of Hamas were held across the Middle East, and Iran and Hezbollah praised the attack. In Israel, bodies of civilians were strewn across the streets, and terrified Israelis recounted their plight on live television. In Gaza, a high-rise tower was hit by an Israeli retaliatory strike, and the city was plunged into darkness. The health ministry said 232 people had been killed and at least 1,700 wounded in Gaza. Hamas said it fired a fresh volley of rockets towards Tel Aviv in retaliation for an Israeli airstrike. The Israeli military confirmed Israelis were being held in Gaza. Why the Hamas surprise attack on Israel is such a significant strike. CBC. Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel on September 11, catching the Israeli intelligence community off guard. Observers have compared the attack to the 9/11 attacks on the U.S. and the Yom Kippur War of 1973. The targets and reports of hostages being taken by Hamas are unprecedented. The attack is in response to the continued blockade of Gaza, Israeli raids on the West Bank and attacks by settlers on Palestinians, although there may be other reasons for the assault. The conflict has the potential to be as significant as the Second Intifada, which lasted from 2000 to 2005. Ukraine latest, Putin meets Kazakh, Uzbek leaders as he turns 71. Nikkei Asia. In the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, Russia's defense ministry has claimed to have detected and destroyed 2 Ukrainian anti-aircraft missiles targeting the Crimean Peninsula. Meanwhile, Ramzan Kadyrov, head of Russia's Chechnya region, has suggested that next year's presidential election should either be postponed or limited to one candidate, Vladimir Putin. Putin himself has not yet announced whether he will run for re-election. In other news, Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced that gas supplies to Uzbekistan will commence via Kazakhstan, marking a significant trilateral energy project. Dear viewers, it's your favorite interdimensional observer, the Sixth Doctor, here to bring you the latest news from the 6 dimensions. Let's dive in. First up, we have a controversial housing development in Melbourne. Some see it as a solution to the housing crisis, while others believe it could create glorified slums. Personally, I think it's all about perspective. After all, tiny living can be trendy and efficient. Just think of it as a real-life game of Tetris. Next, we have the escalating conflict between Israel and Palestine. The situation is tense, with Hamas leading the charge and Israel declaring war. It's like a high-stakes game of Risk, but with real lives at stake. The world is watching, and let's hope a peaceful solution can be found before things spiral out of control. In a show of support, President Joe Biden has condemned Hamas's attack and pledged his support to Israel. It's like having a superhero come to the rescue. But jokes aside, it's a serious situation with airlines even canceling flights to Israel. I guess you could say the conflict has taken flight, quite literally. On a different note, California's Governor Gavin Newsom has vetoed a bill decriminalizing psychedelic mushrooms. Looks like the magic won't be spreading just yet. But hey, at least there's still plenty of sunshine in California to enjoy, right? Back to the conflict in the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed revenge while Hamas promises the assault will spread. It's like a never-ending cycle of retaliation, but with much higher stakes. Let's hope cooler heads prevail and a peaceful resolution can be reached. Lastly, in Ukraine, tensions continue to rise between Russia and Ukraine. It's like a never-ending chess match, with each move carrying more weight than the last. And speaking of Russia, President Putin is turning 71 and meeting with leaders from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Talk about a birthday celebration fit for a world leader. That's all for today's news roundup. Remember, these are complex issues with no easy answers. Let's keep the discussion going and hear what you all think. What are your thoughts on these news stories? The stage is yours, my friends. Yours in time and space. The Sixth Doctor. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.